1. This actually happened a few hours ago. In fact, I just got home and have climbed into bed, and I'm locking myself away from the rest of the world until further notice. Today I had off work, so I decided to make the most of it. I drove about 30 minutes away from my house to the closest city, I live in the boonies, and compiled a mental list of things I needed to get done. Open a new bank account, meet my dad for lunch, grab some groceries, etc. The first thing I needed to get done was stop at the bank to open a new bank account. But I got into town way earlier than anticipated, so I decided to stop at the nearest Goodwill to look for some clothes. I ended up walking all over that place. I was up and down every single aisle looking at everything from wicker baskets to broken electronics. I spent some time in the dressing room trying on clothes, tested out fitting my tablet in a few different purses, and ended up checking out about an hour later with some books and clothes. I grabbed my bag and hurried outside into the blustery, wet, slushy parking lot. This is Wisconsin, y'all. And hurried towards my car, thankful I had parked close. I opened up my purse and reached in for my keys. My keys are in reality one key, a safety rope, an expired Anytime Fitness fob, and a Groot keychain. But they weren't there. I shook my bag. Nothing. So I set my Goodwill bag on top of the car, brought my purse onto the hood, and started pulling stuff out. Now would be a good time to note that my purse is actually a giant canvas bag that I throw absolutely everything into. My wallet, tablet, 2 notebooks, a calendar, and about a pound of garbage. But no keys. What the heck? I tried the handles of the hatchback and of course it's locked. The wind was really picking up now. I pressed my face against the windows and peered into my car. If the keys were inside, they must have been wedged in between the door and the seat, tucked away from view. It didn't make sense, so I headed back into the Goodwill and asked if anyone had turned in any keys. The cashier was very sweet and helpful. She said that no one had, but she would keep a lookout. But I needed to find my keys. Earlier this week, I locked my keys in the car and had to call a locksmith to get them out. I was feeling extremely unimpressed with myself, but surprised I would be so quick to make the same mistake. So I retraced all my steps throughout the Goodwill. If you remember, I walked all over that place, so again I went up and down the aisles, peered on shelves, and crouched to look underneath racks. And even knocked on the door of the dressing room I had been in, and demanded the poor woman inside tell me whether or not my keys were in there. They weren't. So now I was panicking. They weren't in the Goodwill, they didn't appear to be in my car. So I checked the time and saw I had about 10 minutes to get to the subway across the street where I was meeting with my dad. I decided to abandon the search temporarily and get his advice. I walked across a few parking lots and crossed over a roundabout, and slid into a booth where I promptly burst into tears. Had I dropped my keys in the parking lot? Would someone actually steal my keys? Were they really that big of a fan of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy? It was a pretty sweet Groot keychain. After lunch, my dad drove me back to the Goodwill where my car was still parked, and we called the insurance company. Thankfully, even though I had just used the service last week, I was covered to get a locksmith to come out and open up my car. My keys had to be inside. 20 minutes and a very efficient locksmith later, we were in. We tore my car to pieces. We were sliding seats forward and back and lifting up everything, even checking the glove box. The keys were absolutely nowhere to be found. "They have to be in the Goodwill," my dad said. Agreed. This time, though, I went bonkers in that place. I was belly crawling the aisles, my face pressed to the ground, up and down and up and down. I probably don't have to tell you that the floors at the Goodwill aren't exactly the cleanest place in the world. I couldn't even pay attention to the strange looks I was getting as dust bunnies clung to my knees and entangled themselves in my hair. Eventually, I enlisted the help of a store associate and she too was looking through the carts and scouring the parking lot. My dad was walking all over the place outside, even looking through snowbanks in case I dropped the keys walking up. I walked over to the purses and started shaking them, digging hands into the pockets, crying like a baby. I looked like I was absolutely mad. I was out of options. I had to call a locksmith to get my key replaced. I drove my dad back to work using his car, and then drove back to the Goodwill so I at least had a vehicle in the meantime. The locksmith came about 30 minutes later, again very friendly and efficient. It was pretty amazing how quickly he was able to craft a new key for my car. What wasn't so amazing was the price. $150. I was sick to my stomach as I watched him slide my card. He handed me my new key, I thanked him, and then I drove my dad's car back to his work. And then we turned right back around for the Goodwill. This wasn't ideal, but it would be fine. A lesson learned. I would keep this new key on me at all times. We got to the Goodwill a few minutes later. Luckily, this all happened within a 5-mile radius, and I thank my dad. I get out of the car and go to get into mine, and I freeze. 2 of my gloves are folded neatly, next to one another on the passenger seat, and right beneath those 2 gloves is a little piece of blue safety rope peeking out. My dad rolls his window down. "What's wrong?" I open the door and grab the rope. Surely it can't be. But it is, right there. Hidden between the 2 gloves are my keys. I literally just spent $150 on a new key for nothing. I burst into tears. We tore the car apart. How could we have missed them? Now, thinking about it, I don't think we did miss them. There is no way. They were underneath the gloves so perfectly. I wouldn't have left them in the car like that, and if I had, we would have seen them when we were searching through the car, which leads me to draw the conclusion that someone must have found them either in the Goodwill or the parking lot, or I don't know, and figured out which car they belonged to, and then set them on the passenger seat, discreetly placing them underneath a pair of gloves, so that passers-by wouldn't see keys just randomly sitting in an unlocked vehicle. They would have had to have done it in the few minutes I wasn't in my car. I don't know why they wouldn't have turned them into Goodwill, but now I'm wishing I would have looked through my car one last time before I got that new key made. Because $150 was way more than I was planning on spending today. 2. I had to take my final exam for an online class. Most online classes have quizzes and tests that are more or less open book because you're at home. I've had a few that made me go into a testing situation somewhere and take my test in front of someone. This university, however, makes you use a program that locks out all other programs so you can't surf the web for answers or use your PDF books, and forces you to sit in front of a webcam with microphone to ensure you aren't accessing devices, your book, or getting fed answers by someone else in the room. If, for some reason, there's a disturbance, say, having to yell to my wife that the TV volume is distracting, or she pops in the room and says, "Are you taking your test?" "Yes? Oh, sorry." You are to look directly into the camera and verbally announce what that sound was, so they know that it was no big deal and yada yada yada. Usually I have to say, "Sorry, that was my cat." This test also charts how long it takes you to answer each question. It has many uses for this data. The biggest, I think, is that a long pause means the person is likely sifting through a book. So at a glance, if their data shows an interruption of a steady pace, it's likely to result in a review of the feed. My laptop has the cam and mic on it, so I take all my tests on it. I feel like it's a lot of demands that I now have to get dressed to take my tests, but weighing that against actually commuting to schools, it's still alright, I guess. The fuck up. I studied all morning, going through review notes and videos. I drank some super coffee. It's basically when we make a pot of coffee and fill the ground's reservoir all the way to the top. I laugh when people ask me how many scoops I use. I don't know, I fill it up. To make the pot as strong as possible. Drank 2 of those. Decided to have a snack before the test. Hindsight is 20/20, but I think that jug of cranberry juice has been in there open for more than 6 months, I'm sure. I had a glass of that, a giant Honeycrisp apple and a banana, so sugary, fibery fruit, expired and suspect cranberry juice, and a ton of caffeine. Surely there won't be consequences. My stomach was instantly grumbling and bloated, but I assumed it was gas. No urge to poop. Had already went 20 minutes ago. And I needed to get this exam done and over with, so I logged in. In the middle of the test, my stomach suddenly and violently gurgles, with the immediate urge to shit. I won't lie, I seriously considered just shitting my pants and soldiering it out. If I was wearing Depends, this would be a different story. Instead, I pick up my laptop and say directly into the camera, "Sorry, this is an emergency, so you're coming with me." As I'm walking into the bathroom, my wife, who's been staying out of the room I was testing in, sees me. "Oh, you're done already?" I say, "Nope, gotta use the bathroom, so gotta take the laptop too." She says, "Oh." Then she realizes that we're still filming and what is happening, and starts laughing over the microphone as I sheepishly close the door. I pan the camera around the bathroom, announcing, "No materials are in here to assist in my test, so yeah." I set the laptop on the sink and turn it to face straight ahead. "I won't make you watch this." The toilet sat directly next to it, so I was sitting just out of sight. I pulled down my pants, sat on the crapper, and lava spewed forth from my bowels. I then remembered the microphone is super sensitive. I cringed and then announced, "I'm gonna turn on the water so you don't have to hear this." I sighed. This might as well happen. I half stand to wipe, and look over to realize suddenly I might have moved my hairy white-as-glue ass into view. I panic and slap the laptop away so it can't see me wiping. Picturing how long the pause between the last question I answered and this one is, I figure someone is going to be on the other end of this video, awkwardly watching me try to hide that I'm pooping, but also not hiding what I'm doing so they know I didn't cheat on the test. I worry that it's still somehow going to lead to trouble, and I'll fail the test. Ugh. I finish up, redo my belt, cringe knowing they'll hear the toilet flushing, and then make a point to turn the camera towards myself again and make sure it sees me wash my hands. At this point, I'm feeling sort of indignant. There wasn't an option for me to say, "Hey, be right back." So I say on the camera on my way back to the table, "This is what happens when you force people to be on camera. You made this happen. I blame you." I finished the test, did well considering. However, that might be flagged for disqualification, for lack of better words, and whether they give me a good grade or not, there's a very good chance they have video of my eyes whitening, running to the bathroom, demonstrating that half the population stands when they wipe, and most of all getting laughed at by their wife, who had suggested that they throw out the juice, who had also advised that they wait and see before logging in, and then got to see him sheepishly close the door with that look on his face that said, "Dear, you were right." 3. So I am a student, and I live in a small bachelor's apartment on the second floor of my building. Unfortunately, I often forget to bring my keys when I pop out to drop off the trash, or go to the common bathroom. So when I went out yesterday, on the street to drop off the recyclable trash, and I realized I had forgotten my keys inside, I wasn't too shocked. Usually I just take the wooden fire ladder to get on the roof over the porch, and then force open the window to my apartment from the outside. I went to do exactly that, but as I was climbing the ladder, vertical ladder, not stairs, I hear angry growling from above my head. I look up, and I see 4 big raccoons staring at me. At that point, I quickly descend the ladder. I forgot to mention that I'm barefoot, in shorts and a t-shirt, and it's raining. After trying for 20 minutes to shoo the raccoons with a long piece of wood, I decide it's futile. I have no phone and no wallet, and I know no one in the neighborhood. I decide then to walk to the bus stop and ask the driver of the night bus if I can go without a ticket, and then go to my friend's house downtown. At the bus stop, I meet a friendly First Nations carpenter that offers to give me a lift on a cab with him if the driver of the bus won't let me come on without a ticket. Unfortunately, he was also a bit crazy as he started telling me how the government controls our minds with chlorine in the water, and how Native Americans invented democracy. He also went on a long monologue about how we all need to leave the city and start living in the forest by hunting and farming our own food. In any case, I get on the bus and arrive downtown, where I walk barefoot for 20 minutes to get to my friend's place, and knock on his window from the garden at 2 in the night. He said he had a mild heart attack. In any case, he let me in, and I slept there, returning home in the morning with borrowed clothes. And that's how a bunch of raccoons made me homeless for the night. 4. It was 2002, and I had finally landed my first real job after graduating college. I was hired as a software developer, and was feeling overjoyed to finally start my career. My supervisor gave me my first actual programming task in the real world. I was eager to get it, but it felt like she gave it to me just to get me out of her way. As a side note, I don't think she liked me that much to begin with. She said that the program ran slow, and to see if I could look into speeding it up. Excited, I checked out the code and started running tests through it to see where the bottleneck was happening. I was able to find where part of the slowdown was happening in pretty short order. It was in an SQL query that was not particularly well written. I studied what the query was trying to accomplish, revised it, and executed. The correct data came out, and I sped the program up from taking 10 minutes to only 5. Excited that I was able to do this in just the first half hour of being given the assignment, I submitted the code and reported to my supervisor. Me, good news, I was able to speed up that program. Supervisor. Oh? By how much? Me, got it down to 5 minutes. Supervisor. How did you do that? I went over in great detail on how I cleaned up the SQL query. I'll spare you the details because I'm sure most people will not care. Supervisor. That's great. Do you think you can make it go faster? And here is where I fucked up. I responded, I'll see what I can do, but you know, you can't clean shit, you can only smear it. There was an awkward pause as she went from having a slight smile to a searing scowl. Supervisor. I wrote that program. It was at this point I sheepishly tucked my tail between my legs and went back to my desk without saying a word. I didn't work there much longer, and in hindsight, I'm actually glad I did say that. 5. So last night I decided to open some hot dogs for dinner. My first mistake was using a knife to open the package instead of finding some scissors. I slice across the bottom of the package, and the knife cuts into my bird finger like it was butter. I stare in shock for a moment at what I've done before cursing loudly and rushing to the sink to run water over the gash. My roommate hears me cursing and asks if I'm alright. I yell back, "No, I'm bleeding!" At this point, my roommate rushes into the kitchen in a panic. I instruct her to grab some napkins for me, and she hands them to me while trying not to faint at the sight of all the blood pouring from my finger. After several napkins full of blood, I remember that I should be holding my hand above my heart and applying pressure to stop bleeding. A couple of napkins later, I have stemmed the flow enough to see that the wound is open, and I can see the meat of my finger. I feel sick and panic a little since I have no idea if I can treat this myself or if I should go to the emergency room. I finally decide that I may need stitches and I need to call someone to drive me. My roommate doesn't drive since she's disabled and my mom is at work. So is my husband. My next mistake was calling my elderly aunt to drive me to the hospital. She can't see very well at night, and I'm sure she was panicked as well. As my aunt was driving, she was speeding and swerving into the opposite lane. I thought I would die in a car crash before we reached the hospital. I'm in a great deal of pain and now afraid for my life while holding my bleeding finger up. After 20 or so minutes of this, we finally arrive at the emergency room and check in at the desk. The wait time in ER rooms is notoriously long. But they weren't busy this night and I got taken to an exam room very quickly. The doctor comes in, looks at my finger, touches it on each side, asking if I'm able to feel it at all. I can, but it's tingly on the left side. I have damaged the nerve in my finger, but it looks like I should get the feeling back eventually. The doctor decides I need stitches and wants to do a block to numb my finger. If you don't know what that is, a long needle inserted into the base of your finger on each side, and lidocaine is injected in to numb your whole finger. It hurts as much as you would expect a needle going through your finger to hurt. I screamed and held down my arm to avoid jerking it away. It felt like the damn needle went all the way through my finger. I still wasn't numb and felt the needle a second time. The tip of my finger still wasn't numb after the second dose. But luckily the base was, and I didn't feel the needle the third time. At this point my finger was nice and fat from all the lidocaine sitting in it, and the doctor decided to give me a few minutes to get completely numb. Meanwhile, my roommate who had come with us was having an anxiety attack, and I had to comfort her. Finally, I got my 2 stitches in, paid a $200 co-pay, and was let out with instructions not to get the stitches wet, and that I could get a shower in 2 to 3 days when they fall out. On the ride home, I was once again afraid for my life, as at one point my aunt drove over the concrete pad at an intersection, and later slammed on her brakes when she saw a deer in the road. The whole time she complained that she couldn't see, and she had an early doctor's appointment the next day, and also how her blood pressure had been high earlier. Sorry, Auntie. Next time I'll plan the slicing of my finger at a more convenient time for you. So, moral of the story is to be careful with knives, or just use scissors to open packages. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Embarrassing Stories, episode 60. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. Okay, well, it's a weekend, so I'm not going to go on too long in this outro. I'm going to finish this video, then I'm going to think about dinner. Then at some point I'll actually go and make it. Likely after I've had snacks and kind of relentless that I got earlier. Okay, gonna head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.